I'm James Beckwith, President and CEO of Five Star Bank. As a community bank, we believe that open dialogue about the issues affecting our region is vitally important. From the economy to the environment to social issues, we look forward to the conversations and hope you'll join in.
Welcome to Studio Sacramento. Today's show was developed in partnership with the American Leadership Forum, with a focus on civil discourse about something that many Californians are very passionate about. If you want to throw an emotional grenade into a conversation, ask a person about their view on immigration. While nationally immigration has many faces, in California the majority of immigrants, both legal and illegal, are Mexican in origin. How California addresses its Mexican immigration issue has broad impacts on our economy, our culture, and our future. Joining us today are Marco Rodriguez, President of the Mexican Cultural Center, Carlos Gonzalez Gutierrez, Consul General of Mexico in Sacramento, and Mario Gutierrez, Vice Chair of the Board of Directors of Farm Worker Justice. Welcome all to the program.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott. Good to be here.
I want to start off with a quote from an article and get your reaction to it. This is by writer Alan Karuba, and the article is titled, "Immigration is Destroying California." There was a time in America where America needed immigrants to work in its factories, to help build its infrastructure of roads, bridges, tunnels, to go west to farm its plains, and all the other tasks necessary to nation building. That era is over. Now immigration, especially illegal immigration from Mexico, Central and South America, is the source of major social and economic problems. What do you
I
think?
would say he's living in a fantasy land. I think that
Really?
California is not only dependent on immigrants, but it's part of our rich culture. It has been from before the founding of the state. And I think that when you think about the #1 source of food for the country, 8% of the food of the country comes just from the Central Valley, is solely and completely dependent on immigration from Mexico. And so it's not just workers, but it's the people, the culture, the contributions that they make. And then we will always be dependent on a workforce that will do the hardest and most difficult labor, and that is agriculture.
And those jobs, you say that we're dependent on those people to do those jobs. And those jobs, even in an economic climate like we're in right now, are these jobs where it is that other Californians are ready to take those up?
You know, I can't see the average Californian individual willing to be working on demand. You know, when you talk about farming, when you talk about vegetables, those are harvested, you know, in the peak of the summer season. You know, and then 12-hour shifts or longer, and I can't see our Californian, you know, being out there in the fields harvesting these fruits and vegetables. And this individual that's quoting this could never be a vegetarian.
But isn't there, with California's unemployment at 10.9% and the Sacramento region's at 11.4%, isn't there a case to be made that every available job should go to a citizen of this country?
They're welcome to take the job. The United Farm Workers has had a campaign, is come take my job, and openly saying, come out and work in the fields with us, take my job. And they only got one person to try it, and they didn't last more than 3 hours.
More than half of unskilled workers in California are immigrants. By unskilled workers, I mean jobs that do not require a high school diploma. This is not new. This is being built over decades. And California has been importing that labor from abroad. It's simply denial to say that California, and the United States in general, but particularly California, does not need immigrants.
Well, Mr. Consul General, the question though is this, is that there has been a drumbeat of dialogue going on that says that the immigration problem, particularly from Mexico, as they define it, is one where it is that Mexican citizens are coming to this country, they're consuming services, they are putting a load on our taxpayers and on our social safety net, and that we just can't afford that anymore. What's your response?
That, unfortunately, public discussion in this country has taken it the other way around. The country that is subsidizing the other is Mexico, not the United States.
Wait a minute. The country that is subsidizing the other is Mexico, not the United States?
Yes.
You're going to have to give us a little bit of detail on that.
Well, if you watch certain programs on cable TV in the United States, you would conclude that it's the United States allowing Mexican workers to come here and earn some living, and that Mexico is in the business of exporting people. The truth is, it's a very bad business for Mexico what is happening, because
Really?
we are exporting our junk, our demographic bonus. We are losing people that we need in Mexico in order to reform our economy. We are growing. We are running out of Mexicans to export. So
We're running out of Mexicans to export?
for several reasons, yes. And for the last 2 or 3 years, it has been almost zero, the net flow out of immigrants from Mexico.
Mario, as a person who has worked on issues related to improving the condition of farm workers for years, tell us, in a scenario where it is that only citizens of California could hold jobs in California, what impact would that have on the industries where it is that there is a large immigrant workforce?
It would be devastating, devastating to not just to the economy, but to the cultural fabric of the state. Scott, look, the majority of people in this country are in favor of some form of immigration reform. You know, everything from temporary, visas for workers to the path to citizenship. But regardless how we define it, we all know that this is something that needs to happen. It's all about the dignity of those workers, the dignity of those families.
Now, I want to speak to an issue, staying with the issue of what happens if only Californians can hold jobs in California. Currently, America is known, but particularly California and the Central Valley is known as the breadbasket of the world. Talk to us from an economic impact in terms of our competitiveness from a food production standpoint about the people that you represent.
Well, look, without having the kind of workforce that has been able to sustain agriculture from Calexico to Redding, all up and down the valleys in the Salinas Valley, we would not be able to continue as the leader in the country to provide cheap food, inexpensive food, quality food, and safe food. This is about food security. The dependency would be, if we don't produce the food, then we're going to be competing on the world market more and more with China, with Turkey, with Chile, with other countries that are exporting food. Take Gilroy, for example, the garlic capital of the world.
That's right.
And so we still have the Gilroy Festival, and it's becoming an anachronism because most of the garlic in this country now comes from China. People don't know that, but that's one of the examples.
Most of the garlic in this country does not come from Gilroy.
The majority of the garlic now comes from outside the United States. And it's just one example of how we're beginning to see the erosion of our competitiveness as a state to produce the kind of food that we are become accustomed to, which is fresh, which is local, which is quality, and which is safe.
And Mario, the root cause of that has to do with immigration?
It does. A lot has to do with immigration, specifically when the conditions are not favorable for them to come and visit, and to come and work in a peaceful environment and make an honest living. And I think the agriculture is a big part of that, because if we take out all of the undocumented workers or people that are still documented and working in our farms, because we do have some of them, your costs to produce these goods are going to be outrageous. Nobody's going to want to work for $8.95 an hour, without any benefits, no medical benefits or anything, no pensions, nothing that comes with it. So You know, the fact that food needs to be produced in other countries. You know, Mario made a good case. You know, now also we lose the quality control that we do have right here. You know, we have many instances where, you know, the products that are produced in agriculture have pesticides and other things that are, if you go to other countries, there's no control for any of this.
Marco,
I'm sorry, I just want to add something that you mentioned in terms of dependency and what would happen if only citizens work. To use California agriculture, 90% of people who work today in California agriculture is born outside the United States. Of those, 90% are Mexicans, and of those, 90% are undocumented. So it's really denial to say that only U.S. citizens must work in the fields in California, because simply there would not be enough labor force to do that.
You know?
well, Marco, let's change the dialogue from talking about farm workers and farm production, which is incredibly important, but let's talk about the emerging economy and jobs and what's happening with the demographics of this state. We have a large population of Mexican descendants, and they are going to be a major force demographically in creating the professions, powering our economy. How do things like education standards and attainment and access play into this discussion of immigration?
You know, one of the key components of that is that a lot of families came from Mexico and they've brought their young children. So these young children that were brought here, you know, from infants, you know, all the way to age 17, around that, you know, now need to go to school, you know, and they are, as a result of their parents coming over here, are now part of the illegal, undocumented people that are here. But we need these young people to make sure that they can get educated, both college degrees or any technical school, any kind of workforce, because we're going to need all their workforce. You know, as many of us, you know, one of the things that's happening in the United States is the number of children per household is diminishing. You know, so we need as many young people to keep our economy alive. We need all those people to get trained and educated. One of the things that's happened in California, I think California has been the leader with AB 540, you know, that's helped, you know, it's going to be a big stepping stone to helping these kids get educated.
Because the problem is that the gap is growing. And what I mean by that is today in California, in elementary school, 1 out of every 2 students is the children of immigrants.
Really?
Yeah, 1 out of every 2. But if either immigrant or the children of immigrants. And if you look to the university level and the college level, it's 12 out of 100. So from 50% in the elementary schools, we are talking about immigrants or children of immigrants today, you move to 12% at the college level. So these kids are the ones who are going to be supporting society as a whole, not only immigrant families, but it's society as a whole. And unless California is
in terms of our Social Security, in terms of being able to create the taxes to provide social services.
Exactly. And I think that it's a challenge for everybody, not only for immigrants, to make sure that that 50% does not stay below high school level, that they reach college level. And unfortunately, I think that there's a lot to be done yet.
Right. And they need the opportunity. And they think they need the opportunity to do something, because otherwise they'll be phantom children on the books, you know, throughout elementary or high school. But the issue, what do they do when they turn 18? Mm-hmm. You know, they can't go out in the workforce because they don't have the proper documentation for it. But they don't know anything else, you know, and they're great young people. And some of them even enlist in the armed forces, you know, so we have them fighting in Afghanistan, overseas, fighting wars, but yet they can't participate in everything else.
Now, at the federal level, there's been a discussion about the DREAM Act, which keeps coming up and going back and coming up and going back. And the proponents talk about how this is a path for young people to be able to take their place in society. On the other hand, the argument is that as long as we keep creating incentives, we're going to continue to exacerbate people coming here illegally. Now, if in fact, Mr. Consul General, there's a brain drain and a person drain from Mexico, shouldn't the government of Mexico be in favor of America having draconian immigration laws?
No, because we are talking about a population, as Marco was saying, that has already established roots here. Obviously, we want to retain people, and we want to build channels for the legal immigration to the United States on a temporary basis, so that it could become circular again, and so that people could come here and then go back. But what about those who are right here younger than 15 years old, as 25% of all immigrants in California arrive to the United States younger than 15 years old, that have spent their whole life here, for whom Mexico is almost a foreign country? They cannot be sent back. That is inhumane. And we need to face reality. Instead of treating them just as any other type of criminal, we think that both countries should treat them as a fundamental link between Mexico and the United States.
No, but hasn't that fundamental link been broken since September 11th? Because as I recall, part of the issue with even farm workers being able to move from Mexico to the United States and back has been damaged by the outcome and aftermath of September 11th.
Right.
So
This is like, to use an old social work term, benign neglect from the 60s. Up until September 11, there was an accommodation and a sense that people would come and they would work, and they would go home part of the year and spend it with their families, then spend the holidays, and there would be this shuttle immigration. Once the border became militarized, it became very difficult for people to cross, very expensive and very dangerous. I mean, we now have vigilantes on the border with shotguns waiting for people to come over the border. So people tend to stay, and when they're not working, they're living in a very difficult. I mean, I've seen people in poverty living 10 in a small room, or living in the back shack waiting for the next crop to come. That's no way to treat people who are contributing so much to our economy. And there's another issue. This whole notion of illegal versus or undocumented. The fact is, they are not criminals. It's not a criminal offense to be here without papers. It's a civil penalty. It's being criminalized by places like Arizona and Alabama and others. But the fact is that we have always been a nation of immigrants. It's only recently that we've seen this notion of illegality for whatever reasons.
Mario, let's put it squarely on the table. There is, in this discussion, one of the things that comes up, and actually I want to read to you something, is about the nature of the population that you are using the term undocumented. Others use the term illegal. And there is a quote that goes, "Large chunks of California, Texas, Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, and Florida have become Spanish-speaking enclaves. They are part of the United States in name only. Immigrants are no longer required to learn English. The fastest growing TV and radio stations are those broadcasting in Spanish. Everywhere one goes, ATMs, restaurants, motor vehicle departments, Spanish is prevalent. Many urban schools in Los Angeles, Chicago, New York teach bilingualism. We are no longer one people who share the same language, culture, history, customs, heroes, literature, and traditions. The bonds of our national union are being torn apart." And this was Jeffrey Cooner, the president of the Edmund Burke Institute, in the Washington Times back in 2009. Mm-hmm. How do you react to that?
It's a very dangerous statement. To me, it's veiled racism. Scott Franklin, the president of the ministries, Baptist ministries in Alabama, just recently held a march to commemorate the March of Montgomery, this Selma to Montgomery, and they have called this immigration and undocumented issues, the civil rights issue of our time, and they were marching hand in hand with the leaders of the civil rights for Latino immigrants in this country. We have to call it what it is. We can call this, security and everything else, but there is a certain element to this whole discussion and debate that is just veiled racism, and we just have to call it for what it is.
Is there any legitimate point in here about people who are concerned that we're losing our traditions in this country?
Think about the fact that a place like Chicago or the Midwest, they have a real richness of people from Eastern Europe, from Scandinavia. Florida has multiple cultures. It's who we are. It's the richness of society. If we don't have the kind of richness that we all bring as immigrants, me being a son of immigrants, et cetera, that's what makes this kind of country strong, is the coming together. And I think our youth understand it better than some of these commentators that we're hearing now.
And Marco, as a matter of fact, is it not the case that part of the malaise that affects some of our closest trading partners, Japan, Greece, Great Britain, Italy, France, has to do with the aging population?
And no new blood.
No new blood.
You run out of new blood. One of the things I was going to mention is that a lot of what immigration has to do is the opportunism of the business people. Let's take construction for one. When construction was abound everywhere, I mean, you would see Mexicans everywhere building houses, building roads, building everything else. So when the economy is great, the federal government actually looked the other way. I mean, we were having more people coming over here and building our houses. But as the economy slowed down, that's when the problem came about. Mm-hmm. So some of this has to do with the economy. When everything's going great, we have more work, we need them. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying opportunistic because if I was a construction company, I need all these Mexicans to build for me.
But let me take this one step further, and with all due respect to the Consul General, does some of this come from people feeling that immigrants that are coming from Mexico, are they Americans or are they Mexicans, and are they really a part of this country or not?
The sad thing about that is some of these individuals have no land because they're not part of our society legitimately. Mm-hmm. And then as the consul pointed out, when they go back to Mexico, they're either deported or sent back, can't come back. They don't belong over there. They can't adapt to the system and to the way of life, and they can't find a job over there, they can't find a job here, so they become, somewhere that they don't find where they belong. So I think it's a loss of identity, which leads to crime. Mm-hmm. They go into the underworld and they become criminals. Mm-hmm. So they accidentally become criminals.
It's very dangerous, as Mario was saying, because the truth of the matter, Mexicans do not come from the other side of the moon. Just like any other immigrant before, they adapt to this country, they assimilate to this country, and they end up loving this country. And they want to be part of this country. They are part of the social fabric. At the same time, they are Mexicans, they feel proud of the culture they come from, their identity. And people better recognize their presence here because today, one third of Californians have Latino origin. In this area in Sacramento, 90% of all Latinos are Mexicans.
90%?
Yes, are people of Mexican origin. Of those Latinos, 90% of those Latinos in Sacramento are Mexicans. What I was saying earlier, another way of looking at the elementary schools today is that one of every 2 kids have at least one father or mother who's immigrant. Think about the long term. These kids will live their whole lives in the midst of the immigrant experience. So California has already changed, and the country has already changed. It's a matter of recognizing those changes, accept them, and promote them.
I want to come back to something that Mario said earlier about sometimes our children seem to be in advance of us. In preparing for the show, I went out and talked with a number of young people, and they don't seem to have the same level of intensity on this issue as we old folks do. What's happening on the ground with our kids that makes their point of view, at least anecdotally, so much different than the debates that go on among people at our age range?
I think it's a reflection of the society in which they have become part of. I mean, California is a multicultural state, more and more so. And the kids are going to school together, they're going out together, they're getting married. The issue of interracial marriage is now almost something from the past, because you now see the kinds of coming together of the diversity of our cultures that starts with children in school. So the idea of a Mexican being, some form of alien is something that comes from, from another time. But the other point I want to make on this, I think, which is really important, is, Carla was talking about the importance of Mexico to this country and to California. The third largest importer of oil to the United States is Mexico. The first largest importer of labor that drives our economy is from Mexico. It is our partner. It is, we need to look at that as part of this whole debate.
And Mario, that's going to be the last word. That's our show. Thanks to our guests, and thanks to you for watching. For Studio Sacramento, I'm Scott Syphax. See you next time right here on KVIE.
I'm James Beckwith, President and CEO of Five Star Bank. As a community bank, we believe that open dialogue about the issues affecting our region is vitally important. From the economy to the environment to social issues, we look forward to the conversations and hope you'll join in.